Victoria Hayes pulled a $100 bill from her wallet and threw it at the mechanic's feet. "Take it," she said loud enough for the whole hangar to hear. "Take it and walk out that door before you embarrass yourself in front of people who actually matter." Ethan Walker didn't flinch. He didn't bend down. He looked at the $90 million jet that hadn't started in 11 hours, then back at the woman who'd just insulted him in front of 40 people. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "that jet isn't broken. Somebody broke it on purpose." The hangar went dead silent, because not one person in that room, not Victoria, not her engineers, not the investors watching from the mezzanine, had any idea that the tired man they were all laughing at was about to expose the biggest betrayal of Victoria Hayes's entire life. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled tonight. And if you believe a man's worth was never meant to be measured by the grease on his hands or the clothes on his back, hit that subscribe button and stay with me all the way to the end. Because what this single father is about to uncover will bring a billion-dollar company to its knees. Now, let's begin. The clock on the hangar wall read 4:47 in the morning, and Victoria Hayes had not slept. She stood at the center of the maintenance floor in a charcoal suit that cost more than most of the men around her earned in a month, and she stared at the aircraft that was ruining her. "Somebody tell me it's fixed," she said. "Somebody in this building tell me the Meridian is going to start." Nobody answered. That was the problem. For 11 hours, nobody had been able to answer that question, and Victoria Hayes was not a woman accustomed to silence when she asked for something. "Daniel," she said. "Daniel, where is he? Get him out here." A tall man in a spotless engineering coat crossed the floor toward her. Daniel Brooks had the kind of calm face that made people trust him instantly, and he'd been her chief engineer for 9 years. He put a hand on her shoulder, the way a doctor touches a patient before delivering bad news. "Victoria, we're doing everything humanly possible." "Everything humanly possible got us a dead airplane, Daniel." She shrugged his hand off. "I have the Kessler Group flying in from Zurich at 9. 9. That's 4 hours. They're signing a contract to buy 12 of these aircraft, and the demonstration model, the one they're supposed to walk onto and feel safe on, won't turn over. We think it's the primary electrical bus. You thought it was the fuel controller 3 hours ago. Before that, you thought it was the software. I'm not paying you to think, Daniel, I'm paying you to know. These systems are the most advanced in the world. Sometimes, don't." She held up one finger. "Don't tell me about the most advanced systems in the world. I built this company from a rented office and one used turboprop. Do not lecture me on aviation." Daniel closed his mouth. Around them, the engineering team pretended not to listen. 12 of the best-paid aerospace engineers in North America, and every one of them was suddenly very interested in their own clipboards. Victoria noticed. She noticed everything. "Where's Marcus?" she said. "Marcus signed off on this aircraft's readiness Tuesday. I want Marcus." "Marcus went home at midnight," Daniel said. "Family emergency." "Convenient." Victoria pressed 2 fingers against her temple. She could feel the headache building behind her eyes, the specific pain that came from too much coffee and not enough good news. 11 hours, $100 million in R&D, the best team money can buy. And I've got an airplane that won't do what my daughter's toy helicopter does. She looked up at the mezzanine. Behind the glass, 3 of her board members watched, arms folded, saying nothing. That was worse than yelling. When the board went quiet, the board was already making phone calls. "Everybody keep working," she said. "Nobody sleeps until it starts." It was in that exact moment, as she turned back toward the aircraft, that she saw him for the first time. A man near the tool cage, older than the engineers, mid-40s maybe, in a jacket that had been washed so many times the color had given up. He had a worn canvas bag over one shoulder, and grease worked so deep into his knuckles that no soap would ever fully take it out. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicking like the rest of them. He was just standing there, head tilted, looking at the aircraft the way a man looks at a stranger he's sure he's met before. "Who is that?" Victoria said. Daniel followed her gaze. Contract maintenance, night shift. He's nobody, Victoria. He cleans up after the real crew. Then why is he staring at my airplane like he owns it? Ethan Walker had in fact been staring at the Meridian for almost 20 minutes. He'd been mopping the wash bay when the noise from the main floor died down, and something about that silence pulled him out to look. Now he stood at the edge of the pool of light, and he was doing the thing he always did. The thing that had gotten him in trouble his whole life. He was listening. Not to the people, to the aircraft. There was a hum coming off the auxiliary power unit that shouldn't be there. A faint, uneven electrical whine, like a note played just slightly out of tune. Everyone else in the building was chasing the loud, obvious problem. Ethan's whole life had taught him that the loud problem was almost never the real one. You. Victoria's voice cut across the floor. Yes, you with the bag. Come here. Ethan looked up. He didn't hurry, and he didn't dawdle. He walked over the way a man walks who has stopped being impressed by important people a long time ago. Ma'am? You've been standing there 10 minutes. Do you have a reason, or do I need to call security? Been closer to 20, Ethan said. And yes, ma'am. I've got a reason. Daniel let out a short laugh. A couple of the engineers smiled. Victoria didn't. Enlighten me. Ethan nodded towards the aircraft. Your APU's fighting itself. There's a whine on it right around the point where it hands power over to the main bus. Your crew's been up in the fuel system all night, I'd guess. And in the software. But the signature I'm hearing isn't a fuel problem or a software problem. He paused. It's the aircraft being told to shut itself down. By something inside it that isn't supposed to be there. For a second, the floor was quiet. Then Daniel laughed again louder. The signature you're hearing, with your ears. Sir, we have $400,000 of diagnostic equipment on this aircraft. I know, Ethan said. I saw the cables. And the equipment says what somebody told it to say. Ethan's voice didn't rise. That was the strange part. He said the most explosive thing in the room without any heat at all. Diagnostics only report on the systems they can see. If somebody hid something outside those systems, your $400,000 of equipment will swear on a Bible that everything's fine. Victoria stepped closer to him. She was studying his face now, the way she studied balance sheets looking for the lie. What's your name? Ethan. Ethan Walker. And what exactly are your qualifications, Mr. Walker? Because I have a room full of people with master's degrees from MIT and Stanford, and none of them are telling me what you're telling me. Ethan was quiet for a moment, and in that moment 100 things went across his face that nobody in the room could read. A whole life. A whole story he'd decided a long time ago he wasn't going to tell anyone. My qualification, he said finally, is that I know what a healthy airplane sounds like, and this one's scared. Daniel snorted. It's scared. Aircraft don't lie, Mr. Brooks. Ethan looked at him for the first time. People do. The temperature in the room changed. It was subtle, but Victoria felt it. Daniel's smile stayed on his face, but it stopped reaching his eyes. Victoria, Daniel said smoothly, we're wasting time. In 4 hours, the Kessler people arrive, and we're standing here listening to the night janitor tell us he can hear things a Rockwell Collins diagnostic suite can't. I've got a team of professionals ready to pull the electrical bus. Let me do my job. Victoria looked at Daniel. She looked at Ethan. And here is the thing about Victoria Hayes, that not even her board fully understood. She had not built a company worth billions by trusting credentials. She'd built it by trusting instinct. And every instinct she had was screaming that the exhausted man in the washed-out jacket had just said something more useful in 90 seconds than her entire team had said all night. But instinct is a hard thing to admit to in a room full of people watching you. So instead, Victoria did what powerful people do when they feel a truth they're not ready to accept. She got cruel. You know what I think, Mr. Walker? She reached into her wallet. I think you're a man who mops floors at a very expensive company, and every night you go home, and you tell yourself you're smarter than the people who work here. And tonight, you finally got a chance to say it out loud. She pulled out a bill. I think you've been rehearsing that little speech for months. No, ma'am. I think you saw a stressed woman and a room full of confusion, and you decided to play the wise old mechanic in the movie, the one nobody appreciates, the one who saves the day. That's a nice story, Ethan said. It's not the one that's happening. Isn't it? She threw the 100 at his feet. It hit the concrete and slid an inch face up. The whole hangar watched it. Take it, Victoria said. Take the $100 and take the win. Go home tonight and tell whoever's waiting up for you that you told off the billionaire. That's the story you want, isn't it? So take it. That's what people like you get to have. A story. Fixing $100 million aircraft isn't for people like you, Mr. Walker. It never was. Somewhere behind her, an engineer laughed, then another. The sound spread through the hangar the way it does when frightened people are grateful for permission to feel superior about something. Ethan looked at the money on the floor. And for a long moment, everyone waited for the thing that always happens next. The wounded pride. The raised voice. The "do you know who you're talking to?" They waited for the mechanic to become small and loud the way small men do when big people push them. It didn't come. Ethan bent down slowly, one knee at a time, the way a man bends when his back has carried heavy things for 20 years. He picked up the bill. He looked at it. And then he did something that killed the laughter faster than any speech could have. He folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket over his heart. Thank you, he said. Victoria blinked. For what? For the $100. My daughter needs new shoes. She's 9 and she's growing faster than I can keep up with. He said it simply, no bitterness, no theater. So thank you, this helps. Nobody laughed now. There is a particular kind of shame that fills a room when cruel people realize the person they've been mocking is not going to give them the fight that would make the cruelty feel justified. Victoria felt it crawl up the back of her neck. She'd wanted him to shout. If he'd shouted, she'd have been right about him. Instead, he'd thanked her and mentioned his daughter's shoes, and somehow made every laughing person in that hangar feel like exactly what they were. But before I go, Ethan said, and now his voice had something new in it. Not anger, something steadier and colder than anger. I'm going to tell you one more thing, ma'am. Because you paid me $100, and where I come from, when a man takes your money, he owes you an honest day's word. I don't need. You've got 4 hours. He nodded at the jet. In 4 hours, some very careful people are going to walk out to that airplane and decide whether to trust you with 12 of them. And that airplane is going to fail again in front of them exactly the way it failed tonight, unless somebody finds the thing that's making it fail. And your team isn't going to find it. Not because they aren't smart. They're plenty smart. They're not going to find it because they're looking in the places the person who did this wants them to look. The word landed in the middle of the room like a dropped wrench. Did this? What did you just say? Victoria's voice had gone very quiet. I said somebody did this, ma'am. Ethan met her eyes and did not blink. An aircraft this new doesn't just refuse to start. Not a demonstration model. Not one that flew fine last week, and this one did I read the log this morning while I was cleaning the ready room. Airplanes don't get stage fright. Somebody reached inside this machine and told it to die at exactly the moment that would hurt you the most. That's a very serious accusation, Daniel said. And his voice had changed. The smoothness was still there, but underneath it now, there was something tight. Victoria, this man is a contract laborer, making wild claims about sabotage in front of the board. Do you understand what happens if that word gets back to Kessler sabotage? The deal is dead the second they hear it. Then don't let them hear it, Ethan said. Let me look. Absolutely not. Daniel. Victoria didn't take her eyes off Ethan. Why are you so certain he's wrong? The question hung there. It was such a simple question, and it changed the whole shape of the room. Because it wasn't, why do you think you're right? It was, why are you so certain he's wrong? And Daniel Brooks, chief engineer, 9 years of loyal service, hesitated for exactly 1 second too long before he answered. Because I've spent my life in these aircraft, he said, and he spent his life with a mop. I've spent my life, Ethan said quietly. closer to these aircraft than you'd believe, Mr. Brooks. Something passed between the two men. A flicker. It was gone before anyone could name it, but Victoria caught it, and she filed it away, the way she filed away everything. She looked at the clock. 4:58. She looked at the mezzanine where the board watched behind their glass. She looked at the dead silent aircraft that in 3 hours and change would either save her company or end it. And she made a decision that everyone in that hangar would remember for the rest of their lives. Mr. Walker. She squared her shoulders. You've got 2 hours. If you can find what you say is there, you find it. If you can't, if this is a story like I think it is, then you walk out that door and you never set foot in this building again, and you take that $100 as the most expensive lesson of your life. Do we have a deal? Daniel stepped forward. Victoria, you cannot be serious. I'm always serious, Daniel. That's why I own the building. She kept her eyes on Ethan. Do we have a deal, Mr. Walker? Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the aircraft, and something in his tired face eased the way a man's face eases when he's finally been handed the one thing he actually wanted. We have a deal, he said. But I've got one condition. You're not exactly in a position to make him. Ethan pointed at Daniel. He doesn't touch the aircraft while I'm working. He doesn't go near the tool cage. He doesn't so much as breathe on my bag. He stands right here where everybody can see him, and he watches me work same as everybody else. The hangar went still. That's an outrageous... Daniel started. Why? Victoria said. And there it was again, the same simple word turned into a knife. Why is that outrageous, Daniel? If the man's a fraud, standing here for 2 hours cost you nothing. You get to watch him fail, so why does the condition bother you? Daniel Brooks opened his mouth, and for the second time that night, the most articulate engineer in the company couldn't find a single word to say. Fine, Victoria said. Daniel, you stand right there. Mr. Walker, the clock started 30 seconds ago. Ethan set down his bag. He didn't head for the flashy diagnostic consoles the way the engineers had. He didn't climb into the cockpit. Instead, he walked a slow circle around the entire aircraft, one full loop, dragging the fingertips of his right hand lightly along the fuselage as he went the way a father runs a hand along a child's forehead to check for fever. He's petting it, one of the engineers whispered. He's listening to it, Victoria said, and she wasn't sure why she'd defended him, only that the whisper had annoyed her. Ethan stopped near the tail. He crouched. He put his ear almost against the skin of the aircraft, near the auxiliary power unit, and he closed his eyes, and for almost a full minute he did nothing at all but breathe and listen. There it is, he murmured. There you are. Somebody hurt you, didn't they? What's he saying? A board member called down from the mezzanine. Nobody answered because everybody was watching Ethan's hands now. They'd changed. The tiredness was gone from them. They moved with a precision that did not belong to a man who cleaned floors quick, certain economical, the hands of someone who had done this exact thing 10,000 times in another life. He opened a small access panel. He looked inside. He went very still. Mr. Walker, Victoria said. Ethan didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low, and it carried a weight that made the whole hangar lean in. Ma'am, I need you to come look at this. Just you. And I need you to keep your face calm while you do it, because there are people in this room who should not know what you're about to see. Victoria walked over. She was CEO of an aerospace company. She'd learned long ago to keep her face still. She crouched beside him. She looked where his finger pointed into the guts of the $90 million aircraft. And she saw it. A small device, no bigger than a deck of cards, wired directly into a junction that had nothing to do with the systems her team had spent all night tearing apart. It was clean. It was deliberate. It was installed with the kind of care that only a professional could manage, and it was wired to do exactly one thing: send a false shutdown command through the aircraft's veins the moment anyone tried to bring it to life. It had a small light on it. The light was green. What is that? Victoria breathed. That, Ethan said just as quietly, is somebody making sure your airplane fails on schedule. It's not a malfunction, ma'am. It never was. Somebody built this. Somebody installed it in the last 36 hours. And somebody planned for your team to spend all night looking everywhere except right here. Victoria's hands, she noticed distantly, were shaking. Not with fear, with rage. The specific white-hot rage of a person who has just learned that the crisis destroying them was not an accident, but a decision one made by someone who walked their halls and shook their hand and drew a salary from their name. Who? She said. It wasn't a question. It was the beginning of a war. I don't know yet, Ethan said. But I know how to find out. This little box keeps a record everything it does and when. And that record's going to have a fingerprint on it. Not a real fingerprint. A digital one. A time. And that time is going to tell us exactly who was standing next to your aircraft when nobody else was around. He paused. But ma'am, I have to be honest with you. The second I pull this thing, whoever installed it is going to know it's been found. And a person who'd do this, a person this careful, they'll already have a plan for when they get caught. Victoria looked up. Across the hangar, Daniel Brooks stood exactly where he'd been told to stand, watching. His arms were folded. His face was calm, but his eyes were fixed on the open access panel, and they had not blinked in a very long time. Mr. Walker, Victoria said softly, not looking away from her chief engineer. How long have you really been in aviation? Ethan followed her gaze to Daniel, and when he answered, his voice was so quiet only she could hear it. Long enough to have helped design the exact system that little box is plugged into, he said. Long enough to know there are only a handful of people on Earth who'd know precisely where to put it, so your team would never think to look. He closed the panel, gently protecting what was inside. Long enough, ma'am, to know we're not looking for a stranger. We're looking for somebody who knows this aircraft almost as well as I do. And on the far side of the hangar, as the first gray light of morning began to press against the high windows, Daniel Brooks slowly unfolded his arms and reached very casually for the phone in his pocket. The phone never made it to Daniel's ear. Daniel. Victoria's voice cut clean across the hangar, calm as still water, and that calm was more frightening than any scream. Put the phone away. Daniel's hand froze halfway to his face. I'm just checking the time, the Kessler flight. There's a clock on the wall the size of a dinner plate. Put it away. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Daniel smiled the smooth smile again and slid the phone back into his coat pocket, and the whole room breathed because they didn't know what they had just watched. But Ethan knew, and Victoria knew, and Daniel knew that they knew, and that was the exact moment the war stopped being cold. Ethan stood up slowly, keeping his body between Daniel and the open access panel, and he spoke without turning his head. Ma'am, I need a favor, and I need it fast. I need everybody who isn't standing on this floor right now to go get coffee. The junior guys. The board can stay behind their glass. That's fine, they can't reach the aircraft from up there. But I need this floor cleared down to the people I can watch. Why? Because the person who built that little box isn't going to sit here and let me take it apart, Ethan said. Not with what's inside it. Right now, they're doing math in their head. They're figuring out how much I've seen and how much time they've got. And a person doing that kind of math is dangerous, and I'd like fewer bodies on the floor when they decide what to do about it. Victoria didn't hesitate. Everyone not directly on the maintenance team off the floor. Now. Break room. Wilson, that means you too. Go. There was grumbling. There was shuffling, but they went, because when Victoria Hayes said now in that particular voice, people had learned across 9 years to move their feet. Within 90 seconds, the floor had thinned from 40 people to 11. Ethan counted them the way a man counts exits. Better, he said. Now what? Now I take pictures. He pulled a cheap phone out of his canvas bag, the kind you buy at a gas station cracked at the corner, and he crouched back down at the panel. Before I touch anything, I document everything. Where it sits, how it's wired, which junction it's spliced into. Because, ma'am, I promise you, when this goes where it's going to go, and it's going to go somewhere with lawyers in it, the first thing they'll say is that I planted it. So I want 100 pictures with timestamps before my fingers ever touch that box. That was when it truly hit Victoria all at once in the gut. Not the sabotage. The other thing. You said lawyers. I did. You think this ends in a courtroom? Ethan looked up at her. Ma'am, somebody just tried to blow up a $2 billion deal by making your flagship aircraft fail in front of your buyers. That's not an angry employee keying your car. That's a person who wanted to destroy this company, or wanted to buy it cheap after the stock cratered, or wanted your job, or all three. This doesn't end with a firing. It ends with the FBI. I just want you standing on the right side of it when it does. Victoria felt the floor tilt under her, and it had nothing to do with the concrete. 6:02 in the morning. 2 hours and 58 minutes until Zurich landed. Take your pictures, she said. Fast. Ethan's hands moved. The gas station phone clicked, and Victoria watched him work and understood with a slow, crawling certainty that Daniel had been catastrophically wrong about this man. Whatever Ethan Walker did with his nights, he had not learned these hands mopping floors. She'd stood beside enough master engineers to know the difference between a man performing competence and a man who simply had it in his bones. Ethan had it in his bones. Daniel, she said without turning. Come here. Daniel crossed the floor. His shoes clicked on the concrete, unhurried, a man with nothing to hide walking toward his boss. He stopped 6 feet away and looked down at the open panel with an expression of professional curiosity. That's not a factory component, Daniel said. No, Ethan said. It's not. May I? Daniel took a step forward, hand extending. No, Ethan said, and he didn't raise his voice, and he didn't stand up, but something in the single flat syllable stopped Daniel like a wall. You may not. You stay right there, Mr. Brooks. You can look with your eyes. Your hands stay in your pockets. Daniel's smile thinned. You don't have the authority to give me orders on my own maintenance floor. He does now, Victoria said. I gave it to him. So put your hands in your pockets, Daniel, and let the man work. And there it was again, that flicker, that half second, where the mask slipped and something ugly and cornered looked out through Daniel Brooks's calm eyes before the calm came back down over it like a curtain. Victoria caught it. She was watching for it now. Victoria. Daniel's voice dropped, became warm, became the voice of a friend. Can I speak to you for a second? Privately, as someone who's had your back for 9 years? Anything you want to say, you can say right here. All right. He glanced at Ethan, then back at her, and lowered his voice anyway, though everyone could hear him. You're exhausted. You've been up all night. And I understand why a man walking in here and telling you it's sabotage feels better than the truth, which is that a very complicated aircraft has a very complicated failure. But think about what you're doing. You've handed a random contract mechanic the run of a $100 million prototype in front of the board 3 hours before the most important signing of your life. If this goes wrong, if he damages that aircraft, if he pulls the wrong wire, you won't have a failed demonstration. You'll have a wreck. And it'll be because you trusted a stranger over the team that's bled for you for a decade. It was, Victoria had to admit, a very good speech. Reasonable, loyal, frightened for her in exactly the way a friend should be frightened. 6 months ago, it would have worked. That's a good point, Daniel, she said. Here's mine. 30 seconds ago, that man told you to keep your hands in your pockets, and your first reaction wasn't fear that he'd damage the aircraft. It was fear that he wouldn't let you touch it. Why would a chief engineer who wants this fixed more than anyone be desperate to get his hands on a device he's never seen before? The silence that followed had a texture to it. You could have leaned against it. That is an insane thing to say to me, Daniel said quietly. Is it 6:09? The green light on the little box blinked steady as a pulse. Got it, Ethan said. He sat back on his heels, phone full of photographs, and let out a breath. Okay. Documented. Now I'm going to tell you all what this thing is in plain words, because I think everybody standing here has earned plain words." He looked around at the ring of faces, the exhausted engineers, the CEO, the chief engineer, with his hands now jammed into his coat pockets. "This is a signal injector. Somebody built it to splice into the aircraft's internal data lines and wait. And when the start sequence runs, it wakes up and it sends one message down the wire over and over. It tells the aircraft that a critical safety fault has occurred. So the aircraft, being a good, smart, safe machine, does exactly what it's built to do. It refuses to start, because it thinks it's protecting the people inside it." "My God," one of the engineers whispered. "It gets worse," Ethan said. "This little box is careful. It only fires during a start attempt. The rest of the time it goes dark and quiet and it wipes its own tracks. That's why your diagnostics came back clean between attempts. You'd run the test, it'd pass, you'd try to start, it'd fail, over and over, all night." He looked at the ring of engineers with something that was almost gentleness. "You weren't crazy. You weren't incompetent. You were being played, every single one of you, by somebody who knew exactly how each of you would think and set a trap for it." Victoria watched the faces of her engineers change as the meaning landed. All night they'd been made to feel stupid, made to doubt themselves, made to fail in front of their boss and the board. And now a stranger in a washed-out jacket had just handed them back their dignity in a single sentence: "You weren't crazy," and one of the younger ones, a kid maybe 26, actually put a hand over his mouth. "Who would know all that?" the kid said. "Who would know how each of us thinks?" "Somebody who works with you," Ethan said. "Every day." He let that sit. 6:14. "I want it off my aircraft," Victoria said. "Now. I can do that," Ethan said. "But ma'am, I want to say one more time, the second I pull it, the game changes. Right now, whoever did this thinks maybe they've still got a chance. Maybe I don't understand what I'm looking at. Maybe I'll pull the wrong thing and make it worse. The moment I get it clean, and it's in my hand, that hope's gone. And a cornered person does the thing they've been holding in reserve." He looked at Victoria very steadily. "So before I pull it, I need you to decide something. When I take this box out, and whoever did this makes their move, are you going to stand behind me? Because I'm about to become the most dangerous person in this building to somebody, and I've got a 9-year-old at home who needs at least one parent." The word parent hit Victoria somewhere she wasn't ready for. "One parent," she repeated. "Her mom passed," Ethan said simply. 4 years ago. It's just us. So when I tell you I need to know, you'll stand behind me. I'm not being dramatic, ma'am. I'm being a father." Victoria looked at this man. This man she had thrown $100 at. This man she had told in front of her whole company that fixing aircraft wasn't for people like him. This man who had picked up her insult off the floor and folded it into his pocket and said, "Thank you. My daughter needs shoes." And she felt something in her chest she hadn't felt in a very long time. Something that had gotten buried under a decade of quarterly targets and board meetings, and being the hardest person in every room. "I'll stand behind you, Mr. Walker," she said. "You have my word, and my word is the only thing in this building I've never once broken." "That's good enough for me." Ethan turned back to the panel. "Everybody take one step back. Not because it's dangerous to you, because I need room and I need quiet." They stepped back. Even Daniel. Ethan reached in. And that was when Daniel Brooks played his card. "Stop." Daniel's voice was suddenly loud, suddenly urgent, suddenly full of a new energy that hadn't been there a second ago. "Everybody stop. Don't let him touch that. Victoria, think. Think about what you're actually watching. A contract mechanic nobody's ever heard of walks onto the floor at 4 in the morning, walks straight to a hidden sabotage device that a room full of engineers couldn't find all night, and knows exactly what it is and exactly how it works." He turned in a slow circle, addressing the whole floor, the whole board behind the glass. How does a man who mops floors know all that? There's only one way. He knows because he built it. He knows because he installed it. He came in here to plant that device, and when I caught him standing by the aircraft, he improvised. He turned himself into the hero who finds the bomb he planted. It's the oldest trick there is. The floor went dead silent. And Victoria, God help her, felt the doubt move through her like a cold current. Because it was clever. It was so clever. It fit. It explained everything, and she hated that it did. 6:19. That's a good story, too, Ethan said quietly, not turning around, his hand still inside the aircraft. You people sure do love your stories in this building. It's not a story, it's the obvious explanation. Search me, Ethan said. Daniel stopped. What? Search me, search my bag, search my truck in the lot. Ethan stood up slowly and turned to face the room, and he spread his arms out from his sides. You think I brought that device in here? Then I had to have carried it. I had to have carried tools to install it. Wire strippers, a splicing kit, the works. That's not something you do with your bare hands in the dark. So, search me. Search everything I own that's inside this fence. Right now, in front of the board, in front of everybody. And when you don't find a splicing kit, and you don't find any of the 12 specialized tools you'd need to wire that box in, then everybody in this room is going to know exactly which one of us is telling the truth. It was a masterstroke, and Victoria felt her doubt begin to turn. Search him, she said. Two of the security guards who'd been standing near the doors came forward. And here is where the story turned again. Because Victoria was watching Daniel's face when she gave the order, and Daniel Brooks did not look relieved. A man who has just accused someone of a crime should look pleased when the search begins. Daniel looked for one flickering instant afraid. The guards went through Ethan's canvas bag. They laid the contents out on a rolling cart, one item at a time, and everyone leaned in to look. And it was the most ordinary collection of a working man's tools you could imagine. A multimeter that had seen better decades. A set of screwdrivers with the grips worn smooth. A flashlight held together with electrical tape. A granola bar. A photograph creased soft of a little girl with a gap in her front teeth holding up a fish almost as big as she was. Ethan's jaw tightened when the guard picked up the photo, but he said nothing. No splicing kit, no wire strippers, no specialized tools. Truck, Ethan said. Keep going. They radioed the lot. They searched his truck. 626, 631, 634. The radio crackled back. Nothing. A booster seat, a spare tire, a case of bottled water. A stack of overdue library books about airplanes with a 9-year-old's name written inside the covers in careful pencil. No tools capable of installing the device that was still blinking green inside Victoria's aircraft. Well, Ethan said into the silence, that's me searched. He looked at Daniel. You want to make it fair, Mr. Brooks? You want to volunteer for the same treatment? Your bag, your office, your car. This is absurd, Daniel said. I'm the chief engineer. My office is full of the tools you're describing. That proves nothing. No. Ethan agreed. It doesn't. Having the tools doesn't make you guilty. Lots of people have those tools. But here's the thing, Mr. Brooks. He took a step closer. I never said what specialized tools you'd need. I said 12. You just said your office is full of the tools I'm describing. But I never described them. So how do you know what's in the toolkit that installs that box, when the only way to know is to have opened the box up and looked at how it's wired? Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. 6:37. Somewhere behind the glass, a board member stood up. That's a trick, Daniel finally said, and his voice had lost the smoothness entirely, now had gone rough and fast. That's a cheap rhetorical trick, and you all know it. Anyone with an engineering background could infer the toolkit. Then infer it, right now. Name the 12 tools. Ethan's voice never rose. That was the terrible thing. He just kept coming quiet and level like water finding cracks. You said your office is full of them, so you know them. Name them, Daniel. Name the 12 and I'll apologize to you in front of this whole company and take my $100 and go home. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Daniel Brooks, the most articulate man in the building, The man who could talk a hostile board into a stock split stood with his mouth slightly open and named nothing at all. And Victoria Hayes understood that she was looking at a guilty man. The realization didn't come with anger, not yet. It came with grief, because Daniel had sat at her kitchen table. Daniel had helped her carry her father's casket. Daniel had stood up at her 50th birthday and given a toast that made her cry. 9 years. And he had wired a bomb into her dream and let her twist all night and let his own team feel like failures and would have let her walk into that meeting and lose everything, all of it, so that he could what? She didn't even know why yet. That was the part that would keep her up for weeks. She didn't know why. Daniel, she said, and her voice cracked on the single word, and she hated that it cracked. Why, Victoria, don't Victoria me. I've heard you say my name 10,000 times, and I want you to know that I will never again in my life be able to hear it without hearing this moment. She was shaking. Why? You have this completely wrong. Then explain it right. She spread her hands. You've got the floor. Everyone's listening. Explain to me how a stranger knew there was a device in my aircraft that your entire team missed. Explain to me why you begged to touch it. Explain to me why you knew what tools it took to install. Explain it. Daniel and I will fall on my knees and thank God I was wrong. Please, please be able to explain it. And Daniel Brooks looked at her, and Victoria watched the exact moment he decided not to try. 6:41. You want to know why, Daniel said, and his whole face changed. The warmth was gone. The loyalty was gone. What was left was something cold and old, and full of a resentment so deep it must have been growing in him for years right under her nose, while she called him her friend. Fine. You want to know why? Because I built half of this company, Victoria. Half. And you put your name on all of it. Every aircraft on this floor has my fingerprints in its bones, and your name on its tail. I made you what you are, and you never once said it out loud. Not once in 9 years did you stand up and say this was Daniel's too. You let them all think you were a genius who did it alone. That is not Bob Buyer, Ethan said suddenly quietly. Everyone looked at him. He said it a minute ago and I let it go, but I shouldn't have. He said this was going to tank the stock. Ethan's eyes stayed on Daniel. You didn't do this out of hurt feelings, Mr. Brooks. Hurt feelings don't build a signal injector. Somebody's paying you. Or somebody's going to buy this company for pennies the second that Zurich deal collapses and the stock falls off a cliff and you've got a piece of it waiting on the other side. This wasn't revenge. This was a transaction. The speech about credit is just the story you tell yourself so you can sleep. Daniel's head snapped toward Ethan, and the look on his face was pure hatred now, and something else underneath the hatred, something that looked a great deal like fear of being seen all the way through. Who are you? Daniel breathed. Who the hell are you really? Because you're right, and there is no way on this earth a contract mechanic is right about that. And the whole hangar held its breath because it was the question every single one of them had been circling for 2 hours. Who was Ethan Walker really? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Victoria. Ma'am, we don't have time for the rest of this. It's 6:43. Zurich lands at 9, they'll be at the gate by 9:40, and right now, your flagship aircraft has a bomb in it, and a confessed saboteur standing on the floor, and neither of those problems fixes itself with a conversation. I need decisions from you fast, and I need them in the right order. Tell me. 1. Security takes Mr. Brooks somewhere he can't touch a phone, a computer, or another human being, and they do it now before he warns whoever's on the other end of this. 2. You call the FBI field office, not the local police, the FBI, because this is federal. The second you say the word aircraft and sabotage in the same breath, and you want them here before the buyers, not after. 3. You let me pull that device clean documented, so it becomes evidence instead of a bomb. He took a breath. And 4, the hard one. You decide whether you're still trying to save this deal, or whether you're trying to save this company, because after this morning, those might not be the same thing. Victoria stared at him. How do you know to do all this in the right order? You're a mechanic. Ma'am, Ethan said, I keep telling you I wasn't always. 6:44, and in the pause that followed, Daniel Brooks made his move. He didn't run for the door. That was what the guards were braced for, and he was too smart for that. Instead, he lunged sideways toward the aircraft, toward the open access panel, toward the little green blinking box, with his hand out, and his fingers spread, and Victoria understood in a flash of horror what he was doing. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to destroy the evidence. One yank, one wrong wire pulled, and the box would be scrambled. Its record gone, and it would be Ethan's word against his. The mechanic against the chief engineer. And suddenly the story where the janitor planted the bomb might live again. He almost made it, but Ethan Walker was already moving. Had been moving. Victoria realized later, since the second Daniel's weight shifted, because Ethan had been watching Daniel's feet the whole time, the way he'd counted the exits, and Ethan got his body between Daniel and the panel and took the full force of the lunge in his shoulder, and the two men went down hard onto the concrete in a tangle, and the whole hangar erupted. "Guards!" Victoria screamed. "Get him off! Get him!" They were on Daniel in a second, two of them hauling him up and back. And Daniel was shouting now, all the calm finally gone. Shouting something that made no sense, and then something that made too much sense. "You don't understand what you're doing. There are people involved in this. You do not want to make enemies of Victoria. You pull that box, and you are signing a war. You cannot win. Let it go. For God's sake, let it go, and I'll make the aircraft start." And everybody walks away. Rich. Do you hear me? Everybody walks away rich. Ethan got to his feet slowly. One hand pressed to his shoulder where it had hit the floor, and he looked down at the man being dragged backward across the concrete. And for the first time all morning, there was something on his face that wasn't calm. It was sorrow. "There it is," Ethan said quietly. "There's the confession, in front of the board, in front of everybody." He looked up at the glass mezzanine, where 4 board members now stood pressed against the window, having heard every word. "You all got that. He just offered to make it start. A man can only offer to fix what he broke." 6:47. "Get him out of here," Victoria said. Her voice had gone to iron. "Separate room. No phone. 2 guards on him at all times. And somebody get me the FBI field office in Seattle on the line right now." They dragged Daniel toward the offices, and he was still shouting as they went, still promising, still threatening, and his voice got smaller and smaller down the corridor until a door closed on it, and the hangar was at last quiet. Victoria stood in the middle of her maintenance floor, in her charcoal suit, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she'd trusted, and she found that her hands would not stop shaking. "Ma'am." Ethan's voice gentle now. "You did good. That was hard, and you did it fast, and you did it right. Not everybody can turn on somebody they love in real time. Most people freeze. You didn't freeze. You? I threw $100 at you," Victoria said. She didn't know why that was the thing that came out, but it came out of her like something dislodged. "2 hours ago, I threw money at your feet and told my whole company you weren't good enough to touch my airplane. And you're the only person in this building who didn't lie to me. The only one." She looked at him, and her eyes were bright. "I don't even know how to hold both of those things at once." "You don't have to hold them right now," Ethan said. "Right now you've got a flight from Zurich in the air and a box to pull. You can hate yourself on a full schedule later. Trust me, I'm an expert at it." And despite everything, despite all of it, Victoria Hayes laughed one short broken laugh that was half a sob and wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist like a kid. "Pull the box, Mr. Walker." Ethan knelt back down at the panel, but Victoria's mind was already circling the thing that wouldn't leave her alone. The thing Daniel had shouted, the thing that had turned her blood cold. "There are people involved in this. You do not want to make enemies of. Not a person. People. This was bigger than one bitter engineer. Somebody had funded him. Somebody was waiting for that stock to fall. And that somebody was right now expecting a phone call that said the aircraft had died, and the deal was dead, and it was time to move. "Ethan," she said slowly. "He was going to call someone. When I stopped him with the phone, he wasn't checking the time." No, Ethan said, working carefully at the wiring, not looking up. He was reporting in, sending the all clear. Aircraft's dead deal's dead, come and get it. Which means whoever's on the other end is expecting good news. And when it doesn't come, they'll know something went wrong. Ethan's hands paused. You're smarter than half the engineers in here, you know that. Yeah. When Daniel goes silent, they'll know. And the smart move for them is to move fast before you can react. They'll try to reach him. And when they can't reach him either, they'll assume the worst, and they'll do damage control on their end. He resumed working, which is why the FBI needs to be here yesterday. Because Daniel's phone, the one in his pocket right now, that phone is a map. Every call, every text, every number. That phone tells us who's really behind this. And I promise you, ma'am, it isn't the man they just dragged down the hallway. He's the fist. Somebody else is the hand. 6:52. The phone in the office rang through to the Seattle field office. Victoria gave her name, gave her company's name, and said the words, aircraft sabotage and demonstration flight for foreign buyers in 1 hour. And the person on the other end stopped being bored very quickly. Agents were coming. 20 minutes, maybe less. She hung up and turned back to find Ethan holding the device in his open palm. Freed at last from the aircraft's guts, the little green light gone dark now that it was cut from power. That's it, she said. That's the thing that almost ended me. That's it. Ethan turned it over gently. $90 million of aircraft brought to its knees by $40 of parts and one man's grudge. Doesn't seem fair, does it? Never does. He set it carefully into a clean plastic bag one of the engineers had found. But here's the good news, ma'am, and I mean it. The aircraft was never broken. Not once. It did everything right. It's the healthiest airplane on this floor. All it needed was for somebody to stop lying to it. So it'll start, Victoria said. For the demonstration, it'll start. It'll start. Ethan almost smiled. Give me 40 minutes to put its skin back on and run the checks I want to run, and it'll purr for your Swiss friends like nothing ever happened. That part's easy now. The hard part's already done. And Victoria felt for the first time since 4:47 that morning the smallest loosening in her chest, the first breath that reached all the way down. And she almost let herself believe it was over, the worst of it, that all that was left was to bolt a panel closed and shake some Swiss hands and let the FBI clean up the rest. She should have known better, because at 6:58 one of the guards came back down the hall at a dead run, and his face was the wrong color, and he said the words that turned the whole morning inside out. Ms. Hayes, we've got a problem. Brooks is secured. He's fine. That's not it. The guard swallowed. It's the surveillance office. We went to pull the hangar footage for the FBI, like you said. The cameras that cover this floor. The overnight recordings. He stopped and made himself say it. They're gone. All of it. Everything from midnight to now. Somebody wiped it. Somebody who knew the system, who had the passwords, wiped every second of last night off the servers before we even knew to look. There's no footage of anybody installing anything. There's no footage of Brooks doing anything. As far as those cameras are concerned, last night never happened. The floor went silent, and Victoria understood with a sick lurch exactly what it meant. She had a device in a bag and a confession heard by the board, yes. But Daniel had a lawyer's answer for both. The device, she planted it. The confession, I was under duress, coerced, terrified, say anything to end it. And the one thing that could have nailed the whole story down. The cold, hard footage of a man installing a bomb in the dark was gone, erased by someone who'd planned for this exact moment, who'd thought further ahead than any of them. He had a partner in this building, Victoria said. Her voice was very quiet. Someone with system access, someone who's still here, right now, on this floor, or was an hour ago. Yes, ma'am, the guard said. And Ethan Walker stood slowly, the bag device in his hand, and looked around the hangar at the ring of exhausted, frightened faces, his own team. The engineers he'd defended, the people he'd said weren't crazy, weren't stupid, were only played, and the terrible new thought settled over all of them at once, like a cold front rolling in. One of them had done it. One of them had stood on this floor all night, pretending to fail, pretending to search, wiping the cameras clean while everyone's back was turned. One of the faces looking back at Ethan right now had been lying the entire time. "Ma'am," Ethan said very softly, so only the closest few could hear. "Nobody leaves this floor. Not one person. Not to use the bathroom, not to get coffee, not for anything. Because we just learned that Daniel wasn't working alone, and the person who helped him is still standing in this room with us, watching us figure it out." Victoria looked around at the faces of the people she had trusted, and found she could no longer tell which of them was her friend, and which of them wanted her destroyed, and the clock on the wall clicked over to 6:59, and Zurich was in the air, and somewhere in that silent hangar, one person's heart was beating very, very fast. Nobody moved. 11 people stood frozen on the maintenance floor, and every one of them was suddenly aware of the person standing next to them, and the arithmetic ran through all of them at once. One of us. One of us wiped the cameras. One of us has been lying since midnight. Ms. Hayes, one of the engineers, said, a heavy-set man named Reyes with 30 years on the floor, and his voice was unsteady. "You can't just, we've all been here all night. We've all been busting our backs on this thing. You can't stand there and look at us like—" "I'm not looking at anyone like anything, Reyes," Victoria said. "I'm asking every person on this floor to stay exactly where they are while the FBI drives here. That's all. Nobody's accused of anything. Nobody's leaving either. That's the same thing and you know it. Then it's the same thing," Ethan said quietly, and Reyes turned to look at him. "Sir, I hear you. You've given this company 30 years, and now a stranger standing here telling you nobody moves. That's an insult, and I'm sorry for it. But I want you to think about something. Whoever wiped those cameras did it to protect themselves, and a person who'll erase the truth to protect themselves is a person who'll do worse when they get cornered. So the person on this floor I'm most worried about right now isn't you. It's whoever's hoping we all just go get coffee and give them 5 minutes alone with a computer." Reyes held Ethan's stare for a long moment. Then slowly he folded his arms and planted his feet, and the meaning was clear. He wasn't going anywhere. And something about the biggest man on the floor choosing to stand still made it easier for the others, and one by one they settled, and the panic that had been about to break loose eased back down. 7:02. "Good," Ethan said. "Now, while we wait for the Bureau, I'm going to keep working because that aircraft still has to start in 2 hours, no matter who did what. And while I work, I'm going to think out loud, and I'd like everybody to listen, because the answer to who helped Daniel is already in this room. We just have to be smart enough to see it." "How can you possibly know that?" a younger engineer asked. Petrov, mid-30s sharp, the one who'd covered his mouth earlier. "Because of the cameras." Ethan knelt back at the panel and began methodically to reconnect the wiring Daniel had tried to tear loose. "Think about it. The device I pulled, that's careful work, but it's remote work. You install it, you walk away, you're never on the floor again. Daniel could have done that himself days ago in 10 quiet minutes. That part needed one person. But wiping the cameras, that's different. That takes system access passwords, and it had to happen after last night's failures started, because up until midnight, everything looked normal, and there was no reason to wipe anything. Somebody made the decision to erase the footage sometime between when I walked out onto this floor and right now. Which means the second person made their move in the last 3 hours. While we were all standing here, the floor went quiet as that sank in. So one of us walked off the floor at some point tonight, Petrov said slowly. Long enough to get to the surveillance office and wipe the servers. Now you're thinking like me, Ethan said. And here's the good news. People remember things like that. So I'm going to ask a simple question, and I want honest answers, because the FBI is going to ask the same question in 20 minutes, and it'll go a lot worse then. He didn't stop working. Between midnight and now, who left this floor even for a few minutes, even for a good reason? Silence. Then reluctantly, Reyes spoke. I went to the head around 1. Was gone maybe 5 minutes. Okay. Anybody see him go? See him come back? I did, Petrov said. He was gone like he said. 5 minutes tops. Not enough time to get to the surveillance office, log in, and wipe 3 hours of footage. That office is on the other side of the complex. Good. That's exactly the kind of thing I need. Ethan glanced up. Anybody else? A ripple went through the group as people searched their memories, and then a woman near the back, an avionics tech named Cho, said, "Marcus." But Marcus left at midnight. Family emergency. He was gone before all this started. And Ethan's hands went still on the wiring. 7:06. Say that again, Ethan said. Marcus deal. Senior systems integration. He signed off on the aircraft's readiness Tuesday, and then tonight around midnight, he got a call and left. Family emergency, Daniel said. Daniel said. Ethan turned around fully now. Not Marcus. Daniel told you Marcus had a family emergency. Did anyone here actually talk to Marcus? Did anyone see him take a call? Or did the news that Marcus was gone come from exactly one mouth in this building? Nobody answered, and the not answering was its own answer. Victoria felt the ground shift under her again. Daniel told me that too, she said slowly. When I asked where Marcus was, right at the start, I said Marcus signed off on this aircraft. I want Marcus, and Daniel said Marcus went home family emergency. I never questioned it. Why would I question it? Daniel had no reason to. She stopped. Daniel had every reason to. Marcus signed the readiness certificate, Ethan said. Marcus does systems integration, which means Marcus is exactly the kind of person who'd have the passwords to the surveillance servers, because those cameras run through the same network backbone he'd manage. And Marcus conveniently vanished at midnight, right before the sabotage went live, on the word of the one man we now know is guilty. He set down his tools entirely. Ma'am, I don't think Marcus had a family emergency. I think Marcus is either running, or Marcus is in trouble, or Marcus is the second man, and Daniel gave him a cover story, so nobody would go looking for him tonight. Or, Petrov said quietly, and the word dropped into the room like a stone. Marcus wiped the cameras before he left, at midnight, and the family emergency is the story that explains why he's not here to answer for it. Ethan pointed at him. That's the one, because it solves the timing problem. The cameras didn't have to be wiped in the last 3 hours if they were set to wipe on a timer, or wiped, and then the system left running clean. Marcus had system access. Marcus could have wiped the overnight recordings and walked out the door at midnight, and the servers would just sit there empty while the rest of us tore our hair out down here. He looked at Victoria. Which means the second man isn't standing on this floor at all. He left 7 hours ago with a head start, and he's the one holding the passwords, the access logs, and God knows what else. He's the dangerous one. Daniel's just the guy who got caught. 7:10. And Victoria felt the whole shape of the thing change again. Felt it get bigger and colder, because she'd been braced to find a traitor in the room, and instead, the traitor had walked out the front gate while she slept, standing up. I need Marcus Deal's home address, she said, turning to the group. I need his phone number. I need to know if he's answering. And I need it before the FBI gets here, because if that man is running, every minute counts. On it. Cho said, already moving toward a terminal, and then she stopped and turned back, and her face had changed. Ms. Hayes, the terminals. If Marcus had system access and he wiped the cameras, how do we know that's all he wiped? How do we know he didn't leave something behind, a back door, a way back in? The floor went cold all over again. She's right, Ethan said grimly. A man careful enough to build that box and set up a cover story doesn't just erase the past. He protects the future. If Marcus has a way back into your network, then right now, wherever he is, he could be watching us, reading your emails, listening even. And the second he realizes Daniel's blown and the box is out, he'll do the same thing he did to the cameras. He'll start burning everything that points to him. Ethan stood. Ma'am, you need to lock this network down. Now. Every password, every access point, everything Marcus could have touched. Before he does to your data what he did to your cameras. I don't have anyone who can do that, Victoria said. Marcus is who I'd call to do that. He was my systems person. Then you've got a fox guarding the hen house, and the fox just left the state. Ethan ran a hand down his face, and for the first time all morning, he looked genuinely worried. And that scared Victoria more than anything, because this was the man who'd stayed calm while she threw money at him. Okay. Who's your IT vendor not internal? Outside firm, whoever manages your backups, your cloud, your offsite. Meridian Digital handles our... Victoria stopped. Meridian Digital. That's Daniel brought them in, 3 years ago. Daniel recommended them and vouched for them and handled the whole contract personally. The silence that followed was the worst one yet. So the outside firm that holds all your backups, Ethan said slowly, the one place your data would be safe if Marcus torched everything inside the building was hand-picked and personally managed by the man we just dragged down the hallway. Oh, God, Victoria whispered. 714. And the scope of it opened up in front of her like a pit. This wasn't a device in an airplane. This wasn't even a device and a wiped camera. This was a structure. This was years of quiet positioning Daniel, bringing in a vendor here, vouching for a hire there, building a machine inside her company, whose only purpose was to be able on the chosen morning to make Meridian Aerospace collapse and leave no fingerprints. She hadn't been betrayed by a person. She'd been colonized by a plan. How long? She said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. How long has this been coming? How long has he been building this thing inside my company? Years, Ethan said quietly. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you already know the answer. 3 years at least, if that vendor's part of it. Maybe longer. This isn't a crime of passion. This is a demolition plan to the minute, and today was the day the charges were set to go off. Victoria put a hand on the aircraft's cold skin to steady herself. She thought about all the mornings she'd walked past Daniel's office and waved. All the times she'd told the board he was the best engineer in the country. All the times she'd trusted his judgment on a hire a vendor, a contract, because Daniel had her back. Daniel had always had her back. And every one of those moments was now something else. Every one of them was a brick in the wall he'd built to bury her. Ma'am. Ethan's voice gentle again, cutting through it. I need you to come back to me. I know what this feels like. But it's 7:15, and I need you here because there's still a version of this morning where you win and it needs you sharp. There's no version where I win, Victoria said dully. The cameras are gone. The backups are compromised. The one man who can testify is a systems expert who's had a 7-hour head start. Daniel's lawyer will say I planted the box and coerced the confession. It's my word and a stranger's word against a decorated chief engineer with no footage, no data, and a vendor that answers to him. Tell me where I win in that. Tell me. And Ethan Walker looked at her for a long moment. Then he said the thing that changed the entire morning. The recorder, he said. Victoria blinked. What? The aircraft's internal maintenance recorder. Ethan turned and put his hand flat on the fuselage. Ma'am, this is a demonstration model of a next-generation aircraft, but it's built on a proven airframe, and that airframe has a legacy system in it. A crash-survivable maintenance data recorder. It's not the flight recorder. It's older and dumber than that. It just logs every maintenance access, every panel opening, every system event with a timestamp onto a sealed unit that is physically separate from your company network. It doesn't touch your servers. It doesn't root through Marcus's systems. It can't be wiped from a keyboard because it isn't connected to a keyboard. It's a black box in the truest sense, and the only way to erase it is to physically remove it and destroy it. He turned back to her. And it's still in the aircraft, because nobody in this building except me remembered it was there. 7:17. And Victoria felt her dead heart start beating again. You're telling me, she said carefully, that this airplane recorded its own sabotage. I'm telling you that if Daniel or Marcus opened that access panel to install the box, the recorder logged it. Date, time, duration. The exact moment somebody was inside this aircraft when nobody was supposed to be. Ethan's eyes were bright now. It won't have video. It's not that fancy. But it'll have a maintenance access event at a time when the logbook says nobody touched the aircraft, and it'll match to the minute against the badge records at the hangar door, and badge records go to a completely different system than the cameras. Marcus wiped the cameras. But I'd bet my daughter's college fund he never even thought about the maintenance recorder because Marcus is a network man, and this thing predates his whole way of thinking about the world. It's analog, it's stubborn, and it doesn't care who you are. How do you know it's even in this model? Petrov asked, moving closer. The next-gen airframe, they stripped a lot of the legacy. Because I know this aircraft, Ethan said. And there it was again, the thing under his words that nobody could quite reach. I know it better than the people who signed off on it. And I'm telling you, that recorder is in there, and I know exactly where, and I know exactly how to pull the data off it. But, he held up a hand, and this matters so. Listen, I cannot be the one who pulls it, because if I touch it, Daniel's lawyer stands up in court and says the janitor tampered with the evidence, same as he'll say about the box. This has to be pulled by someone with authority, documented chain of custody, clean ideally with the FBI standing right here, watching me point at it, and someone else doing the pulling. Otherwise, the best piece of evidence in this whole building becomes worthless the second a lawyer breathes on it. So we wait for the FBI, Victoria said. We wait for the FBI, 15 minutes, and we make sure that in those 15 minutes, nobody, and I mean nobody, gets near this aircraft. Ethan looked around the floor. Because we just figured out loud in front of everyone that the one piece of evidence Marcus couldn't reach from his keyboard is sitting in this airframe. And if Marcus left a partner behind after all, if I'm wrong, and there is still a second person on this floor, then that person just heard exactly what they need to do to save themselves. Destroy the recorder before the FBI arrives. The floor went dead silent, and this time every person on it understood the stakes completely, and they all, without a word, took a step closer to the aircraft, forming a loose ring around it, guarding it, and Victoria felt her throat tighten at the sight at her people. The ones she'd made feel stupid all night, closing ranks around the machine to protect the thing that could save them all. 7:20. And that was when the lights went out. Not all of them. The emergency lighting stayed on, pale and low, but the main floods that lit the maintenance floor died all at once, plunging the hangar into a dim gray, half-dark. And somebody yelled, and there was the scrape of feet, and Ethan's voice cut through all of it like a blade. Nobody move away from the aircraft. Everybody stay on the airframe. Hands on it if you have to. They killed the lights to move in the dark. Do not give them room. Victoria's heart slammed against her ribs. Who killed the lights? How? Marcus, Ethan said grimly, and she could hear him moving, positioning himself between the darkness and the access panel. Or Marcus's back door. He's still in the system. He heard us. Or someone told him. He killed the floor lights remotely to buy his partner 30 seconds of cover. Everybody count off. Right now. Say your name so I know where you are and who's here. They counted off in the dark. Reyes, Petrov, Cho. One after another, voices in the gloom. 11 names, and Ethan tracked them, and Victoria tracked them, and it came out right, all 11. Everyone accounted for, nobody had bolted for the recorder in the dark. And then Ethan said very softly, "That's 10. The floor went cold. "Count again," Victoria whispered. They counted again, and it was 10. 10 voices, where there should have been 11, because somewhere in the confusion of the lights dying, one person had not counted off. One person had gone silent, and when Cho's shaking flashlight beam swung across the floor, it landed on an open door at the far end, a door that led toward the electrical room swinging slowly shut. "Someone's gone," Petrov breathed. "Someone slipped out when the lights—" "Who?" Victoria's voice cracked. "Who's missing? Who was here that isn't now?" And in the dim emergency light, the 10 of them looked at each other, counting faces. And it was Reyes, big, steady Reyes, who said the name, and his voice was full of disbelief and something close to heartbreak. "It's the kid," he said. "It's the intern, Tyler. Danny's intern. He was standing right here, and now he's—" Reyes turned toward the swinging door. He went out the electrical room door, toward the aircraft's other side. Ethan finished already moving where the recorder access is. He didn't kill the lights to run. He killed the lights to get to the recorder from the far side while we were all looking at each other. He was sprinting now around the nose of the aircraft into the dark. Victoria, get those floods back on any way you can. Reyes, the far access panel, go. 7:23. And everything happened at once. Victoria lunged for the wall panel, found the manual override for the floods, a heavy industrial breaker. Marcus's remote couldn't touch because it was mechanical, and she hauled it down with both hands, and the flood slammed back on blinding white. And in the sudden brutal light, there he was, Tyler, the intern. 22 years old, Daniel's intern. The quiet kid who fetched coffee and took notes and had been standing invisibly at the edge of every meeting for 6 months, so young and so forgettable that not one person had counted him among the suspects, had counted him among the people at all. He was crouched at the far side of the aircraft at the recorder access panel, which was already open, and he had a screwdriver in his hand, and he was reaching into the airframe toward the one piece of evidence that could bury Daniel and Marcus and whoever paid them. "Tyler, stop!" Ethan roared, and it was the first time all morning he'd raised his voice, truly raised it, and it froze the kid for half a second. Half a second was enough. Ethan crossed the last 10 feet and got a hand on Tyler's wrist, the one holding the screwdriver, and pulled it back and away from the aircraft, and the kid cried out and struggled, and Reyes arrived a second later and got both arms around him from behind, and it was over. The screwdriver clattered to the concrete, and Tyler sagged in the big man's grip and started unbelievably to cry. "I didn't want to," Tyler sobbed. "I didn't want to. They made me. You don't understand. They said they'd... I didn't want any of this." "Easy," Ethan said, and the anger drained out of him as fast as it had come, because he was looking at a terrified kid, now, not a mastermind. "Easy, son. You didn't do it. You didn't reach it. Look at me. You didn't touch the recorder. Whatever they've got on you, you're not in as deep as you think you are yet. But you have to stop right now, and you have to tell the truth, because in 10 minutes people with badges are going to walk through that door, and the story you tell them is the only thing standing between you and the next 40 years. 7:25. Tyler hung in Reyes's arms, shaking, and Victoria walked slowly toward him, and she should have been furious, and part of her was, but a bigger part of her was just tired and sad, because he was so young, younger than she'd been when she started the company, and someone had reached into his life and turned him into a weapon. "Tyler," she said quietly, "who made you Daniel?" The kid shook his head, and what he said next stopped Victoria's heart cold. "Not Daniel," Tyler whispered. "Daniel doesn't even know about me. I was never Daniel's. Daniel thinks I'm just his intern." He looked up and his face was wet and gray with terror. Marcus recruited me 8 months ago. Marcus is the one who Daniel built the box, but Daniel's not in charge. Daniel thinks he's running this. He's not. He never was. Marcus let Daniel think it was his idea, his revenge, his plan. But Marcus is the one who set it all up. Marcus is the one taking the money, and Daniel's just... Tyler swallowed. Daniel's just the guy they're going to let take the fall. The floor went utterly silent, and Ethan Walker slowly straightened up and looked at Victoria, and the two of them understood at the same moment that everything they'd figured out in the last hour had been exactly backward. Daniel wasn't the hand behind the fist. Daniel was another fist. The confession they'd wrung out of him, the speech about credit and being overlooked, all of it was real, all of it was true, and all of it was beside the point because Daniel Brooks was a bitter, guilty man who'd been played just as thoroughly as Victoria had set up to be the loud, obvious, satisfying villain that everyone would stop looking after they caught. Marcus wanted Daniel caught. Victoria said slowly, the horror of it unfolding. He wanted us to find the box. He wanted us to catch Daniel confessing. Because as long as we're all celebrating that we caught the saboteur, nobody's chasing the man who actually built this whole thing. And nobody's protecting the recorder, Ethan said. Which is the one thing that has Marcus's access events on it, not just Daniel's. Marcus needed that recorder destroyed, and he needed it destroyed while we were all distracted congratulating ourselves. So he left a kid behind with a screwdriver and a debt he couldn't pay, and he waited. Ethan looked down at Tyler. How were you supposed to signal him when it was done? He's watching somehow. How does he know if it worked? Tyler's eyes flicked involuntarily to the cracked gas station-looking phone in his own shirt pocket. Ethan went very still. "He's on the phone with you right now," Ethan said. "Isn't he? He has been the whole time, listening." And from the phone in the terrified intern's pocket, muffled but unmistakable in the dead silent hangar, a man's calm voice spoke. A voice several of them recognized, a voice that had said good morning to them in the break room 100 times. "Hello, Ethan," Marcus said. "I've been trying to figure out who you are for an hour. A contract mechanic who knows about the legacy recorder, who knows the toolkit, who moved fast enough to catch my kid. You're not a mechanic, so I'll ask you the same question everybody's been asking all morning, and this time I think you'd better answer it." A pause. "Who are you really?" "Because I built this plan for 3 years and I accounted for everyone at Meridian Aerospace, every engineer, every executive, everyone, except you. You're not in any of my files. You don't exist. So tell me before those agents get there and this gets complicated for both of us. Who are you?" And every eye in the hangar turned to Ethan Walker, and the clock on the wall read 7:27. And for the first time all morning, the quiet man with grease on his hands and a folded $100 bill over his heart looked not afraid, but caught, as though the one question he'd spent 4 years running from had finally found him in the last place he'd ever expected to hear it. Ethan looked at the phone in the intern's pocket for a long moment. Then he reached out gently and took it from Tyler's shirt and held it up in front of his own face, and when he spoke, his voice was very calm and very quiet, and it carried across the silent hangar like the tolling of a bell. "My name is Ethan Walker," he said. "And you're right, Marcus. I'm not in your files. You want to know why I'm not in your files?" He paused. "Because your files only go back 3 years. And I left this industry 4 years ago." On the other end of the line, Marcus said nothing. "You built your whole plan on the systems in this aircraft," Ethan went on. "The data lines, the start sequence logic, the safety interlocks that shut the engine down when they get a fault signal. You know those systems cold, Marcus. I'll give you that. You know them well enough to hide a box in them and make a room full of good engineers feel like fools." He turned slowly so the whole hangar could hear him, so his own team could hear him, the people who'd defended that aircraft with their hands in the dark. "But you don't know them as well as the man who designed them. Because I did. 4 years ago, I was the lead systems architect on this airframe's safety and integration package. The interlock logic you exploited to shut this aircraft down, I wrote it. The recorder you sent a child to destroy, I'm the one who insisted it stay in the design when everybody else wanted to strip it out to save weight. I fought for that recorder in a conference room full of people who told me it was obsolete." His voice didn't rise, but it hardened layer by layer into something like steel. "I put that recorder in this aircraft, Marcus, 4 years ago, specifically so that no one could ever do to it what you just tried to do. So, you'll forgive me if I say it back to you plainly. You didn't account for me because you thought this airplane's father was gone. He's not gone. He's standing on the floor holding your phone." See, 7:29. The hangar was so quiet you could hear the emergency lighting hum, and Victoria Hayes stood 10 feet away with her hand pressed to her mouth, and the last 4 years of her own company rearranged themselves in her mind. The lead systems architect. She'd heard about him. Of course, she'd heard about him. When she'd acquired the airframe program, there'd been a name attached to it, spoken with a kind of reverence. A brilliant young engineer who'd designed the safety architecture, and then everyone said simply, walked away. Vanished. Quit at the top of his career and disappeared, and nobody knew why, and the program had limped forward without him, and she'd never once imagined that 4 years later he'd be mopping her wash bay at night under a name nobody bothered to learn. "You," she breathed. "You're the architecture files, the ones we could never get anyone to fully understand, the ones that were signed." "E. Walker," Ethan said quietly without looking at her. "Yeah, that's me, ma'am." Marcus's voice came through the phone again, and it had lost some of its calm. "That's not possible. Walker moved out of state. Walker doesn't do maintenance work. Walker's wife got sick," Ethan said, and his voice changed on the word went low and rough, and every person in the hangar felt it in their chest. "Walker's wife got sick right at the top of his career, And Walker discovered real fast that the most important system he'd ever designed didn't matter at all next to the sound of his little girl asking if mommy was going to be okay. So Walker quit. Walker walked away from all of it. The title, the money, the aircraft, all of it, to be home. And then Walker's wife died anyway, and it was just him and a 5-year-old and a mortgage and a grief he couldn't see the bottom of. He swallowed. And when the money ran out, Walker took whatever work he could find that let him pick his daughter up from school. Night maintenance, contract mechanic. Nobody asks a night mechanic about his resume. Nobody looks twice. That was the point, Marcus. That was the whole point. I didn't want anybody to look twice ever again. Looked up, and his eyes found Victoria's. Until tonight. When I heard an airplane I built crying out in the dark and I couldn't walk past it. Because it was mine before it was ever yours. And you don't leave your own kid to die on the floor just because you changed your name. 7:31. Victoria felt tears on her face and did not wipe them away. So here's where we are, Marcus, Ethan said, and the steel came back into his voice, all business now. You built a beautiful plan. 3 years. A box, a bitter chief engineer to take the fall, a systems man to run it from the shadows, a scared kid to clean up the one thing you couldn't reach from a keyboard. It's good work. It nearly worked. But you made one mistake, and it's the same mistake everybody in this building made tonight from the CEO on down. You looked at the man in the washed-out jacket, and you decided he was nobody. And nobody, it turns out, is the most dangerous thing you can leave standing in a room. He paused. The FBI is 9 minutes out. The recorder is intact, and it has your access events on it from every time you went into that airframe over the last month, time-stamped on a sealed unit you cannot reach. Your kid didn't touch it. Your box is bagged. And I'm about to hand this phone to a federal agent with your voice on it live, having just confessed to running a 3-year sabotage operation in front of a dozen witnesses. So I'll give you the only piece of advice I've got. Stop running, right now. Because the story where you're the mastermind who got away is already over. The only story left is how much time you do, and that number gets smaller the closer you are when they knock. There was a long silence on the line. And then Marcus Deal, in a voice that had gone flat and cold and stripped of all its calm, said the thing that turned the whole morning one final time. You think it's about the deal, Marcus said. You think I did all this to tank one contract and pick up the stock. That's cute. That's what Daniel thinks too. That's what I let Daniel think. A pause. But you're the architect, Walker, so you of all people should be asking the real question. Why this aircraft? Why the demonstration model? Why sabotage the exact airframe that's about to be sold to a foreign buyer and flown out of the country? Another pause longer, and something in it made the hair on Ethan's arm stand up. I'm not the one you should be worried about. I'm just the contractor. The people who hired me don't want the stock. They don't want the company. They want 12 of these aircraft in the hands of a buyer who was never really Swiss, with a safety architecture they've had 3 years to study, and one small modification already built into the demonstration model that your FBI friends aren't going to find, because it's not in the box you pulled. It was never in the box. The voice went quieter still. You found the loud problem, Walker. Congratulations. You always were good at the loud problem. But you taught a room full of people tonight that the loud problem is never the real one. So maybe you should take your own advice before 9 o'clock. Abditin. 2. The line went dead. 7:33. And the hangar, which had been silent, went into something deeper than silence. Ethan stood absolutely still, the dead phone in his hand, and the blood had drained out of his face, and Victoria had never seen him look like this, not once, all morning, not when she threw money at him, not when Daniel lunged, not when the lights died. This was different. This was a man who had just heard something that scared him all the way down. Ethan, Victoria said. Ethan, what did he mean? What did he mean not in the box? Ethan didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. He means we've been fighting the wrong war all morning. He turned to face her, and his eyes were wide and urgent. The box I pulled the signal injector that was designed to be found. Not by me, not this fast, but eventually. It was Daniel's toy. Daniel's revenge, loud and obvious and satisfying. It shuts the aircraft down so it fails the demonstration and the deal collapses and the stock tanks. That's the story we were supposed to catch. And if I'd been 10% less stubborn, we'd have caught exactly that story, patted ourselves on the back, fixed the box, started the airplane, and sold 12 of them to Zurich. He grabbed her arm. But Marcus just told us the buyer was never really Swiss. And he told us there's a second modification. Something small. Something built into the aircraft itself, into the systems that the FBI won't find looking at a box in a bag. Ma'am, the sabotage that shut the airplane down wasn't the attack. It was the cover for the attack. It was designed to make us tear this aircraft apart looking for one thing. Find it, feel relieved, and stop looking. So that the real thing, whatever Marcus's people actually built into this airframe, flies out of the country next week inside a demonstration model in the hands of people who spent 3 years learning how its safety systems think. The engineers around them had gone white. What real thing? Petrov said. What could they build in that we wouldn't? I don't know, Ethan said. But I designed these systems, and I can think of a dozen things you could hide in an airframe this complex that would never show up on a start sequence test, because they'd only wake up in flight or under specific conditions or on a command sent from the ground. A backdoor into the flight controls. A modification to the interlock logic that could be triggered remotely. Something that turns a passenger aircraft into... He stopped himself and looked at Victoria and didn't finish the sentence because he didn't have to. 7:35. Victoria's legs felt like water. You're saying my aircraft, the one I'm about to sell. You're saying somebody turned it into a weapon. I'm saying Marcus just told us they did right before he hung up because he wanted us to know, Ethan said grimly. That's the part that scares me most. He didn't have to say any of that. He could have just run. But he told us because it doesn't matter that we know. Because whatever's in this aircraft, he doesn't think we can find it in time, and he wanted the architect to spend his last 90 minutes before the buyers arrive knowing exactly how badly he lost. Ethan's jaw tightened. And he might be right. Because he's had 3 years, and I've got an hour and a half. Then we don't sell it, Victoria said. We cancel, right now. No demonstration, no signing, we ground the aircraft and we tell Zurich the deal is off. And tip off Marcus's people that we know, Ethan said. So they scatter and take the plan with them and rebuild it somewhere else in somebody else's aircraft. And next time, there's no stubborn architect mopping the floor to hear it crying. He shook his head. No, ma'am. We can't just cancel. But we sure as hell can't sell it either. What we can do is find it. The real modification. Before 9 o'clock. Because the same recorder that logged Daniel's box logged everything else that was ever done to this airframe, including whatever Marcus's people installed. It's all in there. Every access event. If they opened this aircraft to build the real thing and the recorder saw it, and it'll tell me when, and if I know, when I know where to look. He was already moving toward the recorder access panel, then stopped himself, physically. Stopped, hands raised. Except I still can't touch it. Chain of custody. If I pull that recorder myself, everything on it is worthless in court, and worse. If I go digging in this airframe alone and find their modification and disarm it. Daniel's lawyer says I planted all of it and I go to prison for the crime I stopped. 7:37. And there it was. The trap Marcus had built revealed in all its cruelty. The one man who could find the real weapon was the one man who couldn't be allowed to touch anything because he was a nameless contract mechanic whose fingerprints on the evidence would poison it. Marcus hadn't just planned the sabotage, he'd planned the architect's helplessness. How long until the FBI? Ethan asked. You said 9 minutes 4 minutes ago, Cho said. So 5, maybe less. 5 minutes. Ethan looked at the aircraft at the clock at Victoria. Okay, here's what we do, and we do it exactly right, because we're going to get one shot, and a lot of lawyers are going to pick apart every second of it later. When those agents walk in, I don't touch anything. I point. I talk. They pull the recorder, they document it chain of custody clean. I read the access log over their shoulder. I find the events that don't belong, and I tell them where in the airframe to look. They open the panels. They find the modification. And if I'm right about what it is, we don't just save your company this morning, ma'am. We hand the FBI a foreign operation that's been running inside American aerospace for 3 years, and Marcus Deal becomes the least important name in a file that goes a lot higher than him. And if you're wrong? Reyes asked quietly. If there's no second modification, if Marcus was just messing with your head on his way out the door. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then I've spent the last 5 minutes scaring everyone in this room for nothing, and I'll be glad to have been a fool, he said. But I don't think I'm wrong, because I keep coming back to the recorder. Marcus is careful. Marcus is the most careful man I've ever gone up against, and a careful man does not send a terrified 22-year-old to destroy a recorder just to hide the access events for a box we'd already found. That math doesn't work. The box was already blown. Hiding when Daniel installed it buys Marcus nothing. He looked around at them. Unless that recorder also holds the access events for something we haven't found yet. Something worth sending a kid to prison to erase. He didn't send Tyler to hide the past. He sent Tyler to protect the future. And that tells me the future is still sitting inside this airframe waiting for 9 o'clock. 7:39. And into that terrible silence from the far end of the hangar came the sound everyone had been waiting for, and now suddenly dreaded. The big rolling door at the vehicle entrance, and the sound of engines and doors and voices, and the sharp-clipped rhythm of people who carry badges and guns and do not waste time. The FBI had arrived, but so Victoria realized with a jolt of pure ice had something else. Because behind the federal vehicles pulling up to the visitor gate, exactly on schedule, exactly as planned, was a long black car. She recognized the car. Her assistant had arranged to bring the buyers from their private terminal. And it was early. It was almost an hour early, and through the tinted glass, she could see the shapes of the people inside. The people who had flown in from Zurich, the people who were never really Swiss. "They're here," Victoria whispered. "Ethan? The buyers? They're here now. They're an hour early." Ethan turned and saw the black car and understood in an instant what it meant. "They're early because Marcus called them," he said. "The second he hung up on us. He told them the plan was blown, the architect was here, the recorder was intact. So they moved up their timeline. They're not here to sign a contract anymore, ma'am. They're here to do one of two things. Either they walk in, act like buyers, and try to get close enough to that aircraft to trigger or retrieve their modification before the FBI finds it, or they're here to make sure that if they can't have it, nobody can." He grabbed her arm one more time, and his voice was low and fast and deadly serious. "Victoria, listen to me. In about 90 seconds, this hangar is going to have federal agents at one door, and a foreign operation at the other, and one intact aircraft in the middle, that both of them want for very different reasons. And the only person in this building who knows what's actually hidden in that airplane is a mechanic whose fingerprints can't touch it." He took a breath. "So I need you to do the single hardest thing I've asked you to do all morning. I need you to walk out there with everything you now know and greet those buyers with a smile and shake their hands and stall them. Keep them away from that aircraft for exactly as long as it takes those agents to pull the recorder, and let me read it. Can you do that? Can you look those people in the eye knowing what they are and buy me 10 minutes? 7:40. And Victoria Hayes, who 12 hours ago had believed that money and technology and the best engineers in the world could solve any problem, who 3 hours ago had thrown a $100 bill at the feet of the only honest man in her building, straightened her spine and wiped the last of the tears from her face, and became in front of all of them the woman who had built a company from a rented office and one used turboprop. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I have been lying to boards, banks, and billionaires for 25 years. Buying you 10 minutes from a room full of liars is the one thing tonight I know I can do." She turned toward the black car, then looked back at him, and her voice caught just once. "Find it. Whatever they put in my airplane. Find it and take it out, and don't let them fly it anywhere. Promise me." "I built her," Ethan said quietly. I'm not going to let them turn her into the thing that kills people. You have my word, ma'am, and you already know what my word is worth." And as Victoria walked toward the black car, with her hand already rising in greeting, and a smile on her face that cost her more than anyone would ever know, and as the federal agents came through the far door calling her name, and as Ethan Walker turned back to the aircraft he had fathered 4 years ago and abandoned, and now had 90 minutes to save the intern. Tyler lifted his tear-streaked face and said in a small broken voice the words that stopped Ethan cold with one foot already moving. "Mr. Walker, there's something nobody's asked, something Marcus made me do 3 days ago before any of this that I don't think was part of Daniel's plan at all." Tyler swallowed. "He had me pull the maintenance logs for a second aircraft. Not this one. The one already delivered, the first demonstration model, the one that flew to Zurich 6 weeks ago and never came back." The words hit Ethan like cold water. "Say that again," he said, turning fully back to the intern. "The first demonstration model. It flew to Zurich 6 weeks ago and never came back. That's what the logs said." Tyler wiped his face with the back of his hand, still shaking in Reyes's grip. "Marcus had me pull everything on it. The maintenance history, the delivery records, the flight plan. And then he had me delete the copy off the local drive after I sent it to him. He said it was routine. I believed him. I believe everything he tells me. That's the whole problem. I've always believed him." The kid's voice broke. "But it wasn't routine, was it? Why would he need the full history of an aircraft that already left the country 6 weeks ago, unless that one was the test?" Ethan said slowly, and the whole picture turned over in his mind one final terrible time. "Unless the first aircraft was the proof of concept. They took delivery 6 weeks ago, flew it out, and they've spent those 6 weeks studying whatever modification they built into it, making sure it works, making sure they can trigger it, making sure it does what they need it to do." He looked at the aircraft in front of him. "And this one, the second one, was going to be the first of the fleet. 12 of them. They weren't buying aircraft Victoria. They were buying a delivery mechanism 12 times over, and they already ran the test 6 weeks ago with the first one, 741. Across the hangar, Victoria had stopped halfway to the black car, close enough to hear, and the color drained from her face. "Then the first aircraft," she said. "The one that's already gone. If it has the same modification, then it's already out there," Ethan said. "Wherever they took it, armed or ready to be armed, and we can't touch it, we can't reach it. It's 6 weeks gone." He turned to the federal agents who were crossing the floor. Now 3 of them in front, a woman in the lead with a badge already out and a hard-fast intelligence in her eyes. "Ma'am, agent, I need you to listen to me very carefully and very fast, because we do not have time for me to earn your trust the slow way." The lead agent stopped. "Who are you?" "My name is Ethan Walker. 4 years ago, I was the lead systems architect on this airframe. Tonight I found a sabotage device in this aircraft. I have the man who built it in a locked office, and in the last 10 minutes, I've learned that the sabotage was a decoy for something much worse, that the buyers arriving right now are not who they claim to be, and that a first aircraft with a possible second modification already left the country 6 weeks ago." He said it in one breath, flat and clear. "I know how that sounds. I know I'm a mechanic in a dirty jacket telling you there's a hidden weapon in an airplane. So don't trust me. Trust the recorder. This aircraft has a sealed maintenance recorder that logs every physical access to the airframe, and it cannot be wiped from the network. And it will show you exactly when someone opened this aircraft to install something they shouldn't have. Pull it. Read it. And everything I've said will either be true or it won't. And you'll know in 10 minutes instead of 10 days. My dick is." The agent looked at him for a long second, and Ethan watched her make the calculation every person made when they met him. The same calculation Victoria had made, the same one Marcus had made, weighing the jacket and the grease against the words and the certainty. And Ethan watched her come down, thank God, on the right side of it. "Where's the recorder?" she said. "I'll show you. I won't touch it. Your people pull it. I'll stand back and talk you through it. Chain of custody stays clean." He was already moving toward the panel. "And agent, the black car at the visitor gate. The buyers. You're going to want people on that car before those doors open because the moment they realize the recorder's been pulled, they're going to do one of two things, and neither of them is good. 7:43. The agent turned and snapped orders, and suddenly the hangar was full of purpose agents, peeling off toward the gate, toward the doors, toward Daniel's locked office, and the lead agent followed Ethan to the recorder access panel with two technicians behind her. And Ethan pointed, hands clasped behind his back, so there could never be any question, and the technicians went to work. And Victoria stood alone in the middle of it all for one suspended moment, watching the machine she loved get taken apart by strangers to save it, and then she squared her shoulders because the black car doors were opening, and there was still one job that was hers and hers alone. "Keep them at the gate," the lead agent had said. "2 minutes. We're not ready to move on them yet. We need what's on that recorder first. Stall them." So Victoria walked out to meet the people who had spent 3 years trying to destroy her with a smile on her face, and shook their hands and told them the demonstration would be delayed a few minutes for a final safety check, and made small talk about their flight, and offered them coffee, and did the hardest acting of her entire life. While behind her inside the hangar, 2 federal technicians lifted a sealed unit out of the aircraft her whole future depended on. 7:46. Inside the recorder came free. "Read it," the lead agent said, and one of the technicians connected it to a ruggedized laptop, and the access log scrolled up on the screen, and Ethan Walker leaned in, hands still clasped behind his back, and read the story of everything that had ever been done to his aircraft. "There," he said quietly. "There. Look. Daniel's box. That's this event 3 days ago. 0200 single access 40 minutes. That's the signal injector going in. That's the loud problem." His eyes moved up the log. "But look above it. 6 days ago. A 4-hour access event in the middle of the night to the flight control avionics bay. 4 hours. Nobody opens an avionics bay for 4 hours to do routine work." And the logbook. "Cho, pull the logbook. The official maintenance logbook says nothing happened that night. No entry. That access was never recorded anywhere except right here on the one system they couldn't reach." He straightened. "Agent, that's your event, 6 days ago. Whatever they really built into this aircraft, they built it that night in the flight control avionics bay, and they had 4 hours to do it, and it never touched a single system your investigators would think to check." The lead agent looked at the log, then at Ethan. "Can you tell me what they installed? Not from a timestamp," Ethan said. "But I can tell you exactly where to open the airframe, and I can tell you what I'd be looking for. And I can tell you the second your people expose it, whether it's a maintenance modification or something that was never supposed to be there. Because I designed every inch of that bay. I know what belongs. And I'll know the instant I see it what doesn't." He paused. "But I can't be the one to touch it. You know why. So it has to be your hands and my eyes, and it has to be right now, because there are people at that gate who know we're looking." 7:48. And that was the moment everything Ethan Walker had been all night. The patience, the calm, the refusal to be rushed, collided with the one thing he could not control, because from the visitor gate came the sound of raised voices. And then the lead agent's radio crackled, and a tight voice said, "The buyers were refusing the coffee, refusing the delay, insisting on seeing the aircraft immediately, and one of them had just made a phone call. They know," Ethan said. "Marcus told them the recorder's the threat, and now they've seen federal vehicles and they know we pulled it. They're not going to wait." He turned to the agent. "Whatever's in that avionics bay, if it can be triggered remotely, the person who just made a phone call is trying to trigger it right now, to destroy the evidence or worse. You have to get me into that bay, and you have to do it in the next 60 seconds, because I am the only person on this earth who can look into my own aircraft and tell you which wire ends this and which wire makes it worse." The lead agent made the fastest, hardest decision of the morning. "Open it," she said to her technicians. "Whatever he says, he points you cut. Go." And Ethan Walker, for the first time in 4 years, went home. He climbed up into the avionics bay of the aircraft he had designed with a federal technician beside him, and his own hands held carefully back. and he looked into the systems he had drawn on paper in another life, when he was a younger man with a living wife and a whole different future. And he found in 90 seconds the thing that did not belong. A module spliced into the flight control network no bigger than a paperback book in a place where nothing should have been wired with the same careful professionalism as the decoy box, but 100 times more sophisticated, and Ethan's blood ran cold because he understood immediately what it was and what it could do. "Don't touch it," he said sharply as the technician reached. "Don't. That's not a bomb. It's worse than a bomb. That's a flight control override. Somebody can send this aircraft a command from the ground anywhere in the world and take the controls away from the pilots. Bank it, dive it, fly it into anything they choose. This is what they built. Not to sabotage a deal. To turn 12 passenger aircraft into remote-piloted weapons sold legally, flown across borders legally, and woken up whenever their owners chose." He was breathing hard now. "And the first one already left. 6 weeks ago. This exact thing is already installed on an aircraft that's out there somewhere in the world right now. 750. The technician's hands were shaking. "How do I disarm it?" "You don't," Ethan said. "You don't touch it because if it's got an anti-tamper trigger, and a man this careful would build one, then cutting the wrong lead sends the command it's waiting for. We don't disarm it. We isolate it. We physically disconnect this module from the flight control bus. One connector, the one I designed to be the single point where the whole network can be severed, because I built this airplane so that a human being could always cut the machine off from anything trying to control it. That connector right there, the gray one. Your hand, my word. Pull it straight out, don't twist, straight out on 3. And in the avionics bay of the aircraft, he had fathered the architect, and the agent counted to 3 together, and the technician pulled the gray connector straight out, and the module died, severed from the aircraft's nervous system. Harmless now, a paperback-sized box of foreign malice hanging from wires that no longer went anywhere. The aircraft was safe, and every wire in it now told the truth. 751. And at the visitor gate, the man who had made the phone call was sending the command over and over, and nothing was happening, because the airplane he'd built for 3 years no longer listened to him. And the federal agents who had quietly surrounded the black car chose that exact moment to move. It was over in under a minute. The buyers, who were never really Swiss, went down without a fight because men who work in the shadows almost never fight in the light, and their phones and their laptops and the command device that would have flown a passenger jet into the ground became in an instant the largest counterintelligence evidence haul the Seattle field office had seen in a decade. And Marcus Deal, running north on a highway 2 counties away, was pulled over 11 minutes later by state troopers who'd been given his plate, and he did not run because Marcus was too smart to run from a thing that was already finished. And when they asked him if he was Marcus Deal, he only said, "Ask Walker how he knew about the recorder," and said nothing else at all. 758. Inside the hangar, the morning finally truly broke. Victoria Hayes walked back in from the gate, and she found Ethan Walker climbing down out of the avionics bay. And the two of them stood in the middle of the floor, where 12 hours ago everything had been falling apart. And neither of them knew what to say, because there were no words sized for what had just happened. "The first aircraft," Victoria said finally. "The one that already left. They'll find it now," Ethan said. Everything Marcus's people had is in federal hands. The command frequencies, the trigger codes, all of it. They know what to look for and where it flew. It's a manhunt for an airplane now, and those they win. That one's not our fight anymore, ma'am. We did our part. We caught it here, we caught it in time, and we handed them the map to the rest. He was so tired he could barely stand. It's over. The part that was ours to fix. It's over. And Victoria Hayes looked at this man, this quiet, exhausted, grease-handed man who had walked into her hangar as a nobody and turned out to be the one person in the world who could save not just her company, but the lives of everyone who would ever have flown on those aircraft. And she thought about the $100 bill, and her face crumpled. "I threw money at you," she said. "I told you fixing aircraft wasn't for people like you. And you're the man who designed them. You're the man who just saved—" She couldn't finish. "How do I even begin to—" "You don't," Ethan said gently. "You don't owe me a speech, ma'am. You did your part too. You believed me when the evidence said not to. You turned on a man you loved in real time to get to the truth. You walked out to a gate full of killers with a smile on your face because I asked you to. Don't sell yourself short on this morning. You were the reason it worked as much as I was." He almost smiled. "You just needed to be reminded that the smartest person in the room isn't always the one with the title. And I think you'll remember that now." 8 o'clock. The sun was fully up. 3 months later, the trial was still months away, but the shape of everything had settled. Daniel Brooks, who had believed to the end that he was the mastermind, learned in a federal interview room that he had been Marcus's puppet from the first day, and the discovery broke something in him that the prison sentence never touched. A man can survive being a villain, but being a fool who thought he was a villain is a different kind of wound. Marcus Deal was charged under statutes that carried the kind of numbers that end a life, and the network behind him, the people who had spent 3 years and millions of dollars to turn American aircraft into weapons, began to come apart, thread by thread, as the evidence from that hangar floor pulled tight. And the first aircraft, the one that had flown to Zurich 6 weeks early and vanished, was located in a hangar in a country that denied all knowledge of it. Its flight control override intact, its trigger never pulled, because the men who could have pulled it were already in custody by the time it would have mattered. Tyler the intern, the terrified kid with the screwdriver, told the truth about everything, every detail, and it mattered, and the prosecutors remembered that he'd never actually touched the recorder, that a man named Ethan Walker had stopped his hand and then spoken up for him in the same breath. And Tyler got the second chance that Marcus had gambled he never would. And Victoria Hayes offered Ethan Walker everything. She offered him his old job back and a better one. She offered him a vice presidency, a corner office, a salary with more zeros than he'd seen in 4 years, the title of chief aircraft architect, a return to the world he'd walked away from, the fame, the respect, all of it held out in both hands, by a woman who finally understood exactly what she was offering it to. And Ethan Walker said no. "I don't need the office, ma'am," he said, standing in her doorway with his old canvas bag over his shoulder, the same bag they'd emptied onto a cart, looking for tools he never carried. "I've got a 9-year-old who's 10 now, and she needs me at the school pickup more than the world needs another genius with a title. I did that math already 4 years ago, and it hasn't changed. The answer's still no." "Then tell me what you do need," Victoria said. "Tell me what I can do. Because I cannot live the rest of my life knowing I threw a $100 bill at the man who saved everything and gave him nothing back." Ethan thought about it for a long moment. "You've got mechanics on that floor who know things," he said finally. "Technicians who see problems the diagnostics miss. Contract people you don't even learn the names of who go home to their kids and come back and do it again and get talked to like they're furniture. There's a whole building full of people like the man you thought I was. And most of them really are just mechanics, but every one of them knows something you don't, and none of them will ever tell you, because the last time somebody like them spoke up, a woman in a nice suit threw money at his feet." He looked at her steadily. "So here's what you can do, ma'am. Make sure nobody in your building ever has to be secretly a genius to be treated like a human being. Make it so the man in the washed-out jacket gets listened to the first time before the airplane's dying and the buyers are at the gate. That's it. That's the whole thing. Do that, and we're square." Victoria Hayes was quiet for a long time. Then she did the only thing that felt true. She built it. A program for the mechanics and the technicians and the contract workers, a real one, with a real budget and her own name on it, where the person on the floor who noticed something could walk into any office in the building and be heard. She reviewed every department where a worker had ever been ignored. She changed how her company listened from the bottom up permanently. And she kept the $100 bill framed on the wall of her office, not as a trophy and not as a punishment, but as the plainest possible reminder that the most dangerous thing she had ever done was decide in a single glance that a man was nobody. Ethan Walker went back to his life. He picked his daughter up from school. He fixed machines. He kept his hands in the work and his evenings for the one person who mattered more than any aircraft he'd ever designed. And when people at the new job, the ones who knew the story, looked at him a little differently now, a little carefully. The way you look at someone who turned out to be far more than you assumed. He never once made them feel small about it, because he of all people knew exactly how easy it was to look at a person and see nothing. But the story of that morning spread the way true things do, through the hangar and the industry and beyond it, and it changed the way a great many people looked at the quiet ones in the corner. And the lesson of it was never really about the aircraft, or the sabotage, or even the weapon that a father's stubbornness pulled out of the sky before it could fall. The lesson was the thing Ethan Walker had known from the very first minute, standing at the edge of the light, while the smartest people in the building failed all around him. The person you decide is nobody is the person you should have listened to first.